feast in the House of Levi takes up an entire wall in the Galleria dell'Accademia in Venice and was painted by Veronese between 1571 and 1573. The picture is enormous in scale, 13 meters 10 by 5 meters 55, and perfectly balanced. Its composition conforms to classical standards. The figures are all gathered in the lower third of an unusually long rectangle. The arches of a loggia opening on the exterior divide the scene into 3 sections. The capitals, columns and edifices are inspired by Andrea Palladio, the architect who during this period renovated Venice under classical inspiration. Stairs with balustrades enhance the symmetry and emphasize the illusion of perspective. The lines of perspective converge on the figure of Christ, seated at the center of the table. Christ is surrounded by St. John, St. Peter, and the other apostles. Facing them, Judas and Levi are positioned symmetrically in relation to the center of the table. Beneath the left arch, several apostles are surrounded by swarms of servants pouring wine, passing plates, and carrying platters to the table. Under the right arch is the remainder of the banquet. More apostles, pages, servants, and soldiers. Between these 2 main scenes in front of the columns are 2 important figures. To the right, the master of ceremonies, or a chef in colorful garb. To the left, a figure clothed in green, possibly a self-portrait of Veronese. Each group is drawn together by gestures and gazes. Figures overlap other figures. Secondary scenes interlock with the primary one. Despite the multitude of figures, the composition leaves no doubt that it depicts the Last Supper, Christ's last meal with his disciples, one of the most frequently painted episodes in the New Testament. Veronese had already grown famous for his paintings of other banquets, such as the marriage at Cana, supper in the house of Simon, and the feast of St. Gregory. These canvases were generally commissioned by religious orders to decorate the refectories of their convents. Thus, while the monks ate, they were reminded of the sacrament of the Eucharist. The special formats were determined by the architecture of the places these paintings were destined for. For the Benedictine monastery of San Giorgio Maggiore, Veronese had painted the marriage of Cana in 1563. For centuries, the picture was the pride of the monastery. It now hangs in the Louvre. Similarly, the Dominican convent of Santi Giovanni e Paolo commissioned this canvas from Veronese to replace Titian's Last Supper, destroyed by fire in 1571. The convent has since been annexed to the Venice Hospital. Historical records suggest that soldiers housed in the convent, perhaps during a drinking bout, set fire to the refectory, burning it to the ground. One monk, Brother Andrea de Buoni, portrayed here, collected enough offerings to commission a new painting from Veronese. The fee was meager, hardly the price of a portrait, but Veronese agreed. Until then, Last Suppers conformed to the solemn precedent set by Leonardo da Vinci in Milan. The episode was always shown at the moment Christ declared, one of you will betray me." Several of the apostles express their disbelief, and only Judas recoils from the group. Veronese radically transformed the scope and the spirit of the Last Supper. Instead of showing the usual 15 or so figures, he used nearly 50. He depicted a vast Venetian-style banquet, which he peopled with richly garbed festive figures. He completed the canvas and delivered it to the Dominican convent on April the 20th, 1573. 3 months later, he was summoned before the tribunal of the Inquisition.
Summoned to the Holy Office before the tribunal, Master Paolo Cagliari Veronese, residing in the parish of San Samuele, asked his surname and Christian name, answered as above. As to his profession, he answered,
"I paint and make figures."
"Do you know the reason we summoned you?"
"No, my lords."
"Have you any idea as to the reason?"
The prior of the convent of Santi Giovanni e Paolo told me that he came here and that your illustrissimos ordered him to have represented in the painting a Magdalene instead of a dog. And I answered that I was most willing to do everything necessary for my honor and the honor of the painting, but that I did not see what purpose a figure of the Magdalene would serve in it.
In this Last Supper you've painted for Santi Giovanni e Paolo, what is the meaning of the figure with the bleeding nose?
It is a servant who has met with some sort of accident causing his nose to bleed.
And what is the meaning of these men of arms, clothed as Germans, carrying halberds?
My reply shall require a few dozen words.
Speak them then.
We painters take the same liberties as poets and madmen take. I made the halberdiers, one drinking and the other at the foot of the stairs, ready to carry out their duties. For it seemed to me that they were the sort of servants a rich and magnificent host would have about him.
And the man clothed as a buffoon with a parrot on his wrist, for what reason have you included him?
For ornament, as is the custom.
Who are those found at our Lord's table?
The 12 apostles.
What is St. Peter, the first one, doing?
He is cutting lamb to pass it to the other end of the table.
What is the next one doing?
He is holding the platter to take what St. Peter will give him.
Tell us what the next one's doing.
He's picking his teeth with a small fork.
How many people do you believe really attended the Last Supper?
I believe there were only Christ and his apostles. But when there is additional space, I adorn it with figures.